This morning, we want to begin by worshiping and declaring the realities of, the character of our great God. As we'll talk this morning, we'll talk about the fact that so often we allow circumstances to influence how we see God rather than allowing the greatness of our God to define our circumstances for us. So we're going to declare that this morning, and we're going to consider the implications of that as we navigate the realities of the world that we operate in and the challenges that we face every day. Would you stand together, and I'll pray as we begin our worship this morning. Father, we begin with you because you are the Alpha, the Omega, the beginning and the end. You are the creator and sustainer of everything. And we want to declare your praises. Because of Jesus, we have a great hope. And Father, that hope is greater than, and it overwhelms, and it runs further ahead of any challenge, any difficulty, anything that we face. God, as we declare who you are, declare the glory that you exist in, may we do so in a way that would realign our hearts, reset our thoughts, and ultimately, Father, allow us to have a different lens on how we view everything. Thank you for your grace, Father. In the precious name of Jesus that I pray. Amen.
I was buried beneath my shame. Who could carry that kind of weight? It was my tomb till I made it. I was breathing but not
we come to you this morning in this time of worship and this time of praise. And even though we don't always believe it, God, we want to know and be reminded that in these battles, in these hard times, that God, you are always there, you are always good, and you are always faithful. We choose to give you the praise and the honor and glory this morning. We pray this in your name. Amen. We're going to take just a few minutes to greet one another, say hello, before we have our announcement time in just a few.
Well, once again this morning, we're so glad that you are with us. Hey, as you took a look at the screen for just a moment, that is introducing what we're calling our spiritual pathway. Our great desire as a community of faith is not allow for our entire faith system to be built around kind of this time that we gather, but to take and leverage this time and then to allow it to infuse everything else that we do, and to help us move from people that are admirers of Jesus, maybe have interest in Jesus, to individuals that are rugged influencers, disciples of Christ. And so we want to be intentional about that, and so we've kind of set up the pathway to be, we want you to connect. We want you to connect with God. We want you to connect with each other. And we want you to connect your story to the story that God is telling. Then we want you to grow. We want you to begin to carve out time to spend with God. And we want you to learn what it means to take the story that God has given you and leverage it into the conversations that you have. We want you to serve. We want you to use the gifts, the abilities, the talents that you have been given and invest them in the lives of other people, and to join with us in the work that God is doing in and through us here as a local community. And then we want you to lead. We want you to take the influence that God has given you, and we want you to teach you how to influence others and help you develop those skills and those abilities. And so that pathway is something that we are deeply passionate about. We've been working on this for a long time and invite you to join us in that. On that back wall, there are resources available to you. We were consistently working on several resources. I've got 4 of them that I'm in the middle of trying to finalize, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, to make those available to you. We will be replenishing that as we go, but would invite you to utilize those resources as part of kind of joining us in moving from consumers to investors in the kingdom of God. And so please join us in that. Ladies, you've got a number of things that are coming up very quickly for you. You've got the True Women Conference. The sign-up sheet is out in the foyer. That's coming up on October 21 and 22. Would invite you to join us in that. We'll do a live simulcast in here in the auditorium. Great opportunity. There were speakers that are coming. The lineup they've got for that is outstanding. I told my wife I will probably sneak into the sound room and just kind of watch from there, so I'm not infringing on the ladies' stuff, but I want to be able to see it, so I may be doing that. But you've got that opportunity. You've also got a book study that Mary Jo will be leading starting on Thursday, October 6th. Again, that sign-up is in the back because we got to order the books for that, so please take advantage of that. And then in November, there's a friendship mixer that we would invite you to participate in as well. And so lots of stuff coming up for you. We had this past week the opportunity to celebrate with and just to kind of, more importantly, walk alongside of 4 families as part of Family Promise, and to just invest in them and love on them and care for them. Several of you joined us in being able to do that. Thank you for your investment. Thank you for loving and serving well, and the privilege that we have to be a part of that ministry and that rotation of churches that are providing respite for, housing, and support for families as they are trying to kind of break that pattern of poverty and get themselves back reestablished. So thank you for joining us in that. After a couple of years of COVID and all of the things that got in the way of that, we have an opportunity to jump back into Kids Hope in the local schools. And so I've got a quick video for you, and then I'm going to ask Sherry and Jen to come and give us an update on where that is and how you can be involved in that.
Kids Hope is a program that identifies church members and partner them with students at the school. And the program is set up to where the mentor comes one day a week for 1 hour and have a one-on-one just relationship with the child. It's not a particularly structured time, but they do have activities that they can do one-on-one with the student.
It's truly about the relationship, and that's really the key behind Kids Hope and its success at school.
But I think that there's so many kids that need this, that don't have it. Again, we don't know the family situations. We don't know what's going on in school. We have absolutely no idea what's going on behind the scenes, but we do know that there's a lot of kids that need this program. And to just spend an hour every single week is not that big of a commitment. You do have to be willing to show up, but most people can find an hour in their week to do it.
A picture is worth 1,000 words. What I see is when that child looks at that mentor and sees the smile that's on that child's face, I mean, that is really special to see the impact that these mentors are making with these children, because I think that child is looking and saying, this is just for me. This person is here just for me.
When you look back on this experience, it will be one of the most rewarding experiences that you will ever have in your entire life. As they go through life, this will be a memory that they will take with them forever of the difference that they made in that life of that child.
Good morning. I'm Sherry McKellar, and this is Jen Van Sickle, and we are your Kids Hope team this year. Very excited about it. We introduced Kids Hope a few years back, and as you know, COVID hit, and it was so devastating to the mentors from our churches and the students that they were spending time with, because we tried to keep up with emails, letters, postcards. It just wasn't the same as that one-on-one personal relationship as you saw in the video. And so last year, we were fortunate enough to be able to open our doors up again at Appleview And I can proudly say a lot of our mentors from Sparta Baptist have come back, and it's been great. It makes such a big difference in these kids' lives. You just don't realize it until you can see what's going on. We are also fortunate in the Sparta community to have other churches want to be a part of this. We partner with Holy Family, and then just this year, City Church reached out to us and asked us to be a part of the Kids Hope program too. And as you know, since COVID, we have so many more at-risk students in our building, not just the academic piece, but also the spiritual piece, and they really need somebody to connect to. They need a positive role model, and that's where you all fit in. Now, Sweet Jen was a mentor for me in this program for a while until I asked her to become a co-director with me, and she so graciously said yes. So I'm going to let her share some of the different stories that she has about being a mentor, and a couple of you in here might be part of that too.
Yes, like Sherry said, I was privileged to be a mentor to a 5th grade student last year. But because I work in the building, I also have the unique, I guess, gift that I can see exactly how everybody's making an impact on the lives of their students when they come in to mentor. I would be able to see firsthand how excited these kids were on the days that their mentors were coming to school. I was able to hear from them how much they enjoyed their mentors and enjoyed spending time with them. And I even had one teacher tell me that the students in her class were asking how they could get a mentor because they noticed how much of a difference it made in the life of their classmate each day that that mentor was at school. So it makes a huge difference. And the thing is, and I can say this at least for me, and I think I can speak for the others as well, what we were doing with the kids wasn't difficult. I would play card games with my student. We would color. If it was nice outside, we might go out on the playground and swing or play basketball. I know that Irene Brake brought in the Little House on the Prairies book series, started that with her student. They would just read that when they had their hour together. It wasn't what we were doing that made a difference with the children. It was the fact that we were there and that we were investing in them every single week and that we were a positive, consistent influence in their life. Tino was such a positive and consistent influence in his student's life. He was actually invited to come to his student's 4th grade recorder concert. So extra props to Tino for going to that. And then he was also invited to come to field day at the end of the school year to participate with his student. So it just goes to show how much that 1 hour per week can mean to a kid. And if that's something that any of you feel that you might be interested in or might have questions in, or maybe would be interested in becoming a prayer partner, I mean, we can use so many more mentors and prayer partners. So if you have any questions about that, or if you want to get the process started, Sherry and I will be in the back at the Welcome Center after service today.
Any questions? Good.
Just think about the breadth of this for a second. You've got Kids Hope, you've got Hand to Hand, you've got our food co-op ministry, you've got our benevolent ministry, you've got our financial counseling ministry, just a whole variety of mercy ministries that we are involved with, and we are so grateful for your investment in that. And then we go from there into the strategic partnerships that we have globally, and just excited about all of those variety of touch points and opportunities that we have to invest in the kingdom and what God is doing locally and globally. And towards that end, we need your help. Financially, we need to be able to resource those ministries and those partnerships and those individuals that are involved in that well. And we're in a place right now where we're working from a deficit financially, and so we're trying to kind of figure that out. But as Tom shared last week, we're about $18,000 behind as we go into the fall, and that puts us in a place where we're trying to make some adjustments. If you are able to partner with us in a more significant way, if you've yet to jump into that and want to participate with us in that, would invite you to do that. You can use the website, you can use the text to give option, you use the black box, you can mail something in, but please join with us as we continue to look for ways that we can be resident foreigners in this place, meaning that we understand that we are a part of a bigger kingdom, but we are for Sparta. And we are invested locally, and we are very much interested in seeing what God wants to do through us locally and globally. So please join with us in that. Let's take a look at the brand new promo video for this series. Give Elena and our team a hand for that. It's very possible that while the artistry was incredible, some of the images in that may have been very unfamiliar to you, and some of them maybe even somewhat disturbing to you, and there's a reason for that. So every few years we circle around back to this series that we've entitled Legendary God. And what we recognize is that in the Old Testament, we have preserved for us this incredible narrative that's been laid out for us. There's so much that has happened in our story that some of us grew up in church and we heard those stories. Many of us didn't, and so we're unfamiliar with those stories. And some of us grew up in church and we've just forgotten them. And so what we've decided to do is every few years to go back and say, what are some of the prominent stories that have been preserved for us in the Old Testament that reveal something about the character and competencies of our great God, and that point us in the direction of who Jesus is, and ultimately the fulfillment of what was promised in the Old Testament. And so we take this series very seriously, but we also enjoy locking in on some familiar stories and oftentimes some unfamiliar stories. So for this series, as we get into this, we're going to talk about today Daniel in the Lion's Den. Very familiar story. And this message today is going to revolve around one question that I think is a question that we oftentimes don't know what to do with. And so we're going to grapple with one question. I'll get to that here in a little bit. Then we're going to jump into Jacob and Esau, that familiar story of what kind of transpired in that whole domain and kind of the tension that was there in between those brothers. Then you have Mephibosheth. I said it the best way that I know how to say it, but great story, incredible story of David's kindness because of a covenant that he made to Jonathan. Then we're going to tackle Jonah. Again, another familiar one that you may have seen the images of in the video that you may not be familiar with is Elisha and the bears. We'll get to that. It's a little disturbing. What it reveals about our God is something that we're going to kind of grapple with. And then the story of Achan and the significance of sin and brokenness, but also the incredible hope that our God has in the midst of how he responds to that. So we're going to tackle that together. But here's kind of the big picture of the entire series. And this is one of those things that we'd love to have you be here. We want you to be a part of this series. We think it's going to be incredibly helpful to all of us as we navigate this together. But really, here's kind of the summary statement. The Old Testament reveals a God whose character is trustworthy, and whose competencies are legendary. The Old Testament reveals a God whose character is trustworthy. Who our God is, he reveals over and over again that he can be trusted, and that matters to us for a number of reasons. But first of all, am I willing to entrust my life to him? But secondarily, how do I grapple with how our culture often characterizes the God of the Old Testament? And the harshness and the vindictiveness and the ways in which people talk about the God of the Old Testament as a reason for discarding Christianity. Here's the reality of it. What we're going to discover together is that the God that is revealed to us in the Old Testament can be trusted. And he has competencies. Who he is, what he's capable of are legendary. They go beyond anything that we can easily comprehend because our God is not like us. His ways are not our ways. His thoughts are not our thoughts. So to get into this morning's message, I want to start with this thought. American culture is fixated on outcomes. We work very hard to figure out what needs to happen to make sure we have certain outcomes that come. One of the things that I think is I love watching sport. I'm not a sports guy because I'm not an athlete, but I'm very interested in sports. And one of the things that I think is interesting to watch is the NFL, where you'll have coaches in both college and the NFL make risky decisions, and then it either works out in their favor or it doesn't work out in their favor, and the outcome determines whether or not the decision was the right decision. Should you go for 2 when you're on the road, when you're down by 1 and you've just gotten a touchdown and you don't want to go into overtime? Do you go for 2 for the win, or do you risk losing? And how that turns out is determines whether it was good or a bad decision, when the reality is sometimes the decision was the right decision even when it doesn't turn out the right way. And the truth is, we as a culture are addicted to positive outcomes. And so we oftentimes will make decisions, and then the negative outcomes will come, and then we'll reevaluate whether that decision should have been made that way or not. And here's the thing that we're going to grapple with. Because we know that we are a culture that is addicted to positive outcomes, we're going to ask this simple question. Is it possible in certain situations that the decisions that we make need to be made in a certain way, independent of the outcomes? And more importantly, is it possible that when the outcomes don't turn out in our favor, is it possible that we still made the right decision? That's the question that we're going to grapple with, and so we're going to jump into that together this morning. The familiar story that we're going to kind of work that out of is Daniel in the lion's den. If you go back to kind of the time of Judah, where they were a nation and they had seen the northern kingdom get taken into captivity and ultimately annihilated. And so now you have Judah, the lower kingdom, and Jerusalem, the city, and there's ongoing overt opposition and defiance to God. And they're going through a season where they're supposed to be responding positively to what God is allowing them to endure so that they will trust him more, and they don't. And so in 586 BC, Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon surround the city of Jerusalem. And if you go back and read, and I've kind of talked about this within the last year or two, we talked a little bit about this, but if you go back and read the research on this, this was a real moment in history, and it was what I believe to be one of the most gruesome moments in history, where they cut off all water. They don't allow the people in the city to have any access to anything outside of the city. And ultimately what goes on, the gruesome nature of what goes on within the confines of that is something that we have a hard time even grasping how severe it was. And so what Nebuchadnezzar does, he comes in and he's notorious for taking people and just kind of dispersing them as a way of kind of just taking away their power and their ability to kind of rise up together. But one of the things that he does is he takes some of the best young individuals and he takes them from their prominent families and he takes them back to Babylon. Now, he does it for 2 reasons. One of the reasons is he wants those prominent families to do what they're supposed to do and submit because he has their kids. But the second reason is because those young kids are what he's going to put within his own kingdom and give them opportunities to use their intelligence, their strengths, what they possess for the benefit of his own kingdom. Well, Daniel we know was one of them, right? And Daniel had 3 friends, and those three friends' names were Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Thank you. And so they all get carted off with a whole bunch of others to Babylon. Now, the truth is, compared to what most other people are going to experience over the next many years, over the next 70 plus years, they had it pretty good. Because they got taken into the palace, and they were going to be trained, and they were going to be fed some of the best foods. And so they're being given some of the foods that they're supposed to have, the diet they're now going to be put on, that's actually going to be far better than what they previously had, and it's far better than anybody outside of the palace has access to. But Daniel knows that these are the kind of foods that is not in alignment with God's design for and desire for the Hebrews. Even though that there was some variance in that, and even though he had some leniency given to him that, the truth is that Daniel knew this was not exactly what was expected, and Daniel wanted to distinguish himself. In fact, what we're told in Daniel 1, verse 8, is that Daniel resolved not to defile himself. In fact, what it really means is he made the pre-decision that he wasn't going to allow himself to get caught up in whatever the cultural norms was, or those things that were going to dilute his distinctiveness as a Hebrew young man. Now, I can stop right there, and we could preach an entire message on what does it mean to decide, to resolve that I'm not going to defile myself, because here's what happens. We oftentimes say we're going to make the right decision until we're put under the pressure and the opportunity in that moment where we make a terrible decision because we're trying to make a decision in the moment rather than a pre-decision before we ever get to the moment. Which is why I want to say it this way. Pre-decisions are superior to prescribed outcomes every time. Pre-decisions, making a decision that that's how far I'll go and I won't go any further. That this is the way I want to protect my heart. This is the way that I want to decide, protect my body. This is the way that I'm going to choose to live financially, relationally, sexually, and otherwise. And I'm going to make that decision before I get to the moment where the pressure is on, the expectations are on, and my hormones or my desires or whatever else are now raging out of control. Because under the moment of pressure, wisdom is rarely found. Pre-decisions are better than me making a decision in the moment, because here's what happens. In the moment, we decide this. That's something for future Nate to have to deal with. I want this right now. I'm the exception to the rule. I can manage the outcomes. I'm different than everybody else. If we don't make pre-decisions and we just allow ourselves to get to a moment where we say, well, I'll decide the right thing in the moment, here's the deal. We don't. Because our will gives way. Because we're caught up in what's happening right there. Daniel resolved not to defile himself. And so we get into Daniel chapter 6. Daniel was about 15 when he was taken captive, and Daniel has now served as a prominent figure in the administration of Nebuchadnezzar, of Belteshazzar, and then as Babylon fell and the Medes and the Persians took over, King Darius comes into power. And King Darius, for whatever reason, sees Daniel as someone who's trustworthy, because for 55 years, Daniel had resolved not to defile himself. Daniel had showed himself to have character and integrity unlike anybody else. And so now you have this non-Babylonian, this Jew, that Darius decides he's going to keep in his inner circle. In fact, Darius is in the process of reestablishing the entire kingdom, so he's going to divide it into about 120 governors, and then he wants to put 3 administrators over those 120 governors to manage the kingdom. And so Daniel is actually going to be one of those top 3 individuals that oversee those 120 governors, and in the midst of that restructuring, we pick up the story of Daniel in the lion's den. But I'm going to get to a question in this story. And this question, I'll be honest with you, is one that as I've sat with many of you, and as I sit with many people over the years, the question that I'm going to pose is one that I think many of us have grappled with already. Some of you are currently grappling with it, and at least eventually all of us will have to deal with this question. And if I'm completely transparent, many of us get the answer wrong. So we're going to get to that question here in just a couple minutes. Let's dive in. Daniel chapter 6, verse 3. Now Daniel so distinguished himself because he resolved not to defile himself among the administrators and the satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. At this, the administrators and the satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs. They're jealous of his power, and they're looking for anything they can do to get dirt on him so they can diminish his power and maybe very well disqualify him for this position because they're jealous of just how distinguished he's become. Check out this next statement in verse 4. But they were unable to do so. You've got prominent figures looking for dirt on Daniel so they can expose him as a fraud, and we're told they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. His character and his competencies were both valid. Finally, these men said, we will never find any basis for charges against this man Daniel unless it has something to do with the laws of his God. Can I just tell you that how crazy would it be to have that said of you? That they looked for dirt. They looked for anything that they could find to disqualify him. And they said they were unable to do so unless they attack his relationship with his God. Otherwise, he's coming up untainted by our scrutiny. I'm just going to say this and we're going to move on. Too many of us have so diluted our character. So many of us have so lacked integrity in certain environments that when people start to scrutinize us, we get offended when the reality is what they're pointing out is oftentimes something legitimate. Let me just say this one more time. When you're talking to somebody and they get the most upset about something that you bring up or a concern that you have in their life and they get the most offended, oftentimes it's because you're actually identifying something that they know that they've not dealt with well in their life. Kind of go back to the old saying, thou doth protest too much. There might be something here. And for Daniel, he was scrutinized heavily and he was proved to be not lacking. So they got to figure out a different plan. Verse 6. So these administrators and satraps went as a group to the king and said, may King Darius live forever. They went as a group, except they didn't bring Daniel with them. The royal administrators, prefects, satraps, advisors, and governors have all agreed, we've all agreed, not Daniel, but we've all agreed, that the king should issue an edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to any god or human being during the next 30 days, except to you, King Darius, your majesty, should be thrown into the lion's den. Darius, we want to spend the next month celebrating you. We want to spend the next month kind of honoring you as the one to be worshiped. There's lots of gods that we worship, but we want to spend the next 30 days worshiping you uniquely, King Darius. What are they doing? They're playing to his ego. They can't figure out how to somehow diminish Daniel, so they're going to play to the ego of the only one who has any power over Daniel. Here, they go on. Over the next 30 days, your majesty should be thrown into the lion's den. Just their natural, easiest option to just discard someone. Now, your majesty, we want you to do something. We want you to issue the decree and put it in writing. Why? Because if I put it in writing, I can't rescind it. So that it cannot be altered. In accordance with the laws of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be repealed. So King Darius, playing on his ego, responds, and he puts the thing in writing. We know this story, right? We're familiar with this story for many of us. But there's a question I want to pose in the middle of this story. Just give me a moment. Verse 10, now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he learns of what's happened. What is Daniel going to do? Is Daniel going to alter what he's always done, or is Daniel going to stay the course knowing that it's right? He went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened toward Jerusalem. 3 times a day, he got down on his knees. He had done this repeatedly. and had prayed, giving thanks to his God as he had done before. And the idea there is that this is just his normal activity. Here's a man who was brought out of his home and into a place that he didn't belong unjustly. And for 55 years, he had served faithfully the leaders that had put him there unjustly. And his way of managing that is to consistently draw his attention back to who God is, what he declares about him, where his identity found, where is his security found, where is his confidence from him, and to pray to that God over and 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 over again, recognizing that there's no way if he doesn't commit himself to that. And so he just does what he's always done. This is what I'm doing to navigate this. I'm worshiping my God. I'm praying to my God, seeking strength from my God, which is why I think maybe the best way to talk about this as we dive in is this. We are prone to determine the wins and losses of our decisions by looking at outcomes. The greatest wins come when we make decisions independent of our outcomes. Daniel did not know what was going to happen to him, but he was pretty sure that because the law had been drafted the way that it was, if he does this, he's going to end up in the lion's den. And here's what we do. God, I know that you've said I should forgive, but if I forgive, I might get hurt again. I know I'm supposed to be more generous, but if I struggle financially and I don't have what I need, I don't know what to do with that. I know that I'm supposed to be pure sexually, but if I don't have my needs met and I don't have companionship, I got to figure it out on my own. We know what it looks like to make good decisions when we know what the outcomes are going to be and when we can impose our will and make the outcomes what we want them to be. What we struggle with is what do we do when we don't have control of the outcomes? Or what do we do when we know that the outcomes are going to be negative? I choose to forgive. I do put myself in a position to be hurt again. I choose to be generous. I do put myself in a position where there are certain wants that I have that may go unrealized. What do we do in those situations? We go on to verse 11. Then these men went as a group and found Daniel praying and asking God for help. So they went to the king and spoke to him about his royal decree. Did you not publish? Like these stupid, ignorant innocents, like, give me a break. Did you not publish a decree that during the next 30 days, anyone who prays to any god or human being except to you, your majesty, would be thrown into the lion's den? As though somehow they've just stumbled upon this. Then they said to the king, Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, your majesty, or to the decree that you put in writing. He still prays 3 times a day. Darius, the guy that you trust, that Jew that has been around for a long time, that you feel like is a man of great character, that you have put in your inner circle, that guy didn't obey your decree. That guy prayed to his God, and we've caught him in it. When the king heard this, he was greatly distressed. I think realizing he had probably been duped, realizing that one of those that he trusted the most, one of those that didn't have an agenda in opposition against him, one that was not fighting for territory, one that was trustworthy, now will be taken off the board. So the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, may your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you. I love that. The king says, here's the deal. I screwed up. I don't know what I was thinking. This was a terrible idea. I'm trusting that your God is better than my stupidity. I'm trusting that your God is more powerful than my ignorance. Daniel, I'm sorry. May your God rescue you. We're getting to the question. It's coming. Then the king returned to his palace and spent the night without eating and without any entertainment being brought to him. And he could not sleep. And at first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. When he came near the den, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions? And all of us, if we're familiar with this story, we go from verse 20 and we jump to verse 21. Because we already know the end of the story. Daniel was courageous, and Daniel trusted God, and God rescued Daniel, and the lions did not eat Daniel. Woohoo! Be like Daniel. That's not the point of the story. That's not the point of the story. Here's the point of the story, I think. Here's the question on the table. And it's going to sound like an obvious one. And then we're going to dive into it for a moment, because I think if we realize the consequences of the question, it forces us to confront something in us that we struggle with. Here's the question. If the lions had eaten Daniel, if Daniel had been dropped in that lion's den after praying the way he had prayed before, had Daniel been eaten by the lions because he did something stupid and so public when he should have found a different way to manage the situation? He wasn't going to be immoral if he just closed his windows. He wasn't going to be immoral if he had just decided, I got to do this differently. I could do it privately. I could do it silently. I'm not going to do it this way. If Daniel had been eaten by the lions, did he still make the right decision? Was the decision that he made to do what he did still the right decision? Of course it was. Why? Because God rescued him. Ready? Let's get really uncomfortable. Let's just sit in this for a second. I forgave my friend who gossiped about me or said something horrible to me, or I forgave a family member who deeply wounded me, and then they did it again. Was I stupid for forgiving them? I sought to reconcile with a friend. I asked for their forgiveness, and they've refused to give me that forgiveness and to reconcile with me. Was that the right decision? Or was I just setting myself up to be hurt again? I'm choosing to pursue sexual purity, but I desperately crave companionship. Am I making the right decision? I'm choosing not to go in the direction that my desires and my orientations lead me, and I'm trusting God to be present with me and to fulfill that deeply, deeply sensitive place in my life. Do I have to let go of God's plan and desire for this and go find my own way because I have been foolish to trust that God would fix that for me or to manage that area for me? I've chosen to become increasingly generous, to grow in the grace of giving, and now I'm struggling financially and God hasn't shown up the way that I expected him to. Is that the right decision? Did I make the right decision? I'm working hard and being responsible and showing up at work, and I am one of the best employees, and I keep getting looked over for promotions. Should I just back off and just take it easy and coast? I'm not being appreciated and valued the way that I think I should be. Should I change gears? I pursued an opportunity that I was confident God had called me to, and now things are dissolving, and I think I made the wrong decision, or I think I trusted God in the wrong way, or I just don't know what to do with this chaos in front of me. Did I make the wrong call? I've been in recovery for my addiction for over a year now, and my marriage is not improving, and my spouse doesn't trust me any more than they did before. I forgave my spouse for betraying me. Then they did it again. Was I just duped? Was I a fool? Am I just an idiot? I chose to give the benefit of the doubt. I chose to believe the best about why somebody didn't do or did do what they did, and now it's turned out that this is a horrible outcome. Did I make the right decision? I got 25 more of those in my head. I'll stop right there. Can I ask this question? How often do outcomes determine our need to go back and reevaluate whether or not trusting God was the right decision? Obeying God was the right decision? doing the right thing and having a bad outcome isn't a bad thing. It's just a difficult thing. We are addicted to positive outcomes. Our culture is addicted to positive outcomes. If X plus Y equals Z, then X plus Y equals Z, then X plus Y equals Z. And if it doesn't turn out the way I expected to, then I'm going to do something different. I'm going to do it my way. I have to come up with my own plan. God, you're not taking care of this the way I want you to, the way I need you to. You're allowing that person to hurt me over and over again. I'm not going to continue to forgive. If you haven't wrestled with that question yet, I promise you it's coming soon. I promise you we all will get to that question. If Daniel had been eaten by the lions, did he still make the right decision? The obvious answer is yes. But if in your circumstances, in your situation, if things don't play out the way that you anticipated, and you don't feel like God gives you favor or protection in that situation, does it make you question your decision? Does it make you waver from that decision? Does it make you choose to go off and do your own thing, your own way? Because God didn't come through the way I expected. I promise you that question's on the table for all of us. Daniel trusted God, but that's not the point of the story. Here's the point of the story. God is trustworthy enough to simply obey and leave the consequences to him. The Bible is not about a bunch of good people and bad people, and we should be like the good people and not be like the bad people. The Bible is not about a bunch of heroes that we need to emulate and not be like the villains. It's been said well that the Bible is about bad people and God is the one we want to emulate because God is the hero. God is the legendary one. God is the one worthy of our trust. God's character is trustworthy and his competencies are legendary. And I have the ability, I have the right, I have the responsibility to trust God and, as has been said, leave the consequences to him. But here's the problem. We can't take our hands out of it. We want so desperately to manipulate outcomes or to reevaluate the decision and the equation and go, you know what? I'm going to backtrack here. Why? Because God's not really as trustworthy as I thought he was. Now we'll get to verse 21. But I'm begging you for the rest of your life, do me a favor, when you get to verse 20 in that text, just stop and ponder that simple question. If Daniel had been eaten, was it the right decision? And where in your life right then are you asking that same question? Because verse 21 is awesome. But verse 20 is the question on the table. Daniel answered, "May the king live forever. My God sent his angel and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me because I was found innocent in his sight. Now have I ever done anything wrong before you, your majesty? You did this." The king was overjoyed and gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him because he had trusted in his God. Awesome. Declare that. That's the greatness of our God, but that's not the point of the story. The point of the story is that our God's trustworthy even if Daniel was eaten by the lions. God is trustworthy even when I end up lonely. God is trustworthy even when I feel like my heart is broken. God is trustworthy when things don't turn out the way that I want them to. God is trustworthy even when I feel like I've invested all of this time and things are dissolving. God is still trustworthy. That's the point of the story. Darius makes this declaration. Then the king, verse 25, Darius wrote to all the nations and the peoples of the languages and all the earth. This declaration is made from Darius, King Darius, over to all of the nations. May you prosper greatly. I issue a decree that in every part of my kingdom, people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel. For he is the living God and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. God just declares his glory and his power in this story. But his character was defined well before this story. His character was predetermined by this story, before the story. God is still trustworthy, and his character is completely without fault, independent of what would have happened. So here's 2 questions, and then we'll close it out together. How often did you allow potential outcomes to negatively influence your decisions? When it comes to your relationships, your money, your expressions of sexuality, your personal integrity? How often, and in what ways, and in what areas do you struggle to walk in obedience because of the question of the outcomes? The second question, in what area of your life right now do you need to make a decision knowing that the potential outcome will hurt you? Who do you need to forgive? What area of sexual brokenness do you need to address? What addictive tendency do you have? What relationship do you need to go seek to reconcile? What financial decision do you need to make that you know it's going to hurt? I can't predetermine how that person reacts. I'm going to take a risk, and I have no idea what the outcome is going to be. Where do you need to take a risk right now? And in what arena do you need to say, God is trustworthy even if the lions had eaten Daniel? God is trustworthy no matter what happens on the other side of this decision. I can't help but end this story this way. If you think about the way that 200 years earlier, the prophet Isaiah talked about the coming Messiah. He says this in Isaiah 53. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before his shears is silent, so he did not open his mouth. See, here's how this story points to Jesus. Ready? Jesus is the greater Daniel because he was devoured by death and rose again to strip death's power from devouring us. Jesus is the greater Daniel because he actually was devoured by death for doing the right thing. He asked the Father to take it from him, and he wouldn't do it. And he was devoured by death, but he was so that in his resurrection, he could keep death from devouring us and having the final say in our lives. Jesus is the greater Daniel. So Daniel's awesome. But Jesus is greater. Can we just rest in this? I plead with you to rest in this and to wrestle with this. Rest and wrestle, rest and wrestle. It seems like a counterintuitive, oxymoron thing to say, but I'm asking you to rest in it and I'm asking you to wrestle with it. God is trustworthy enough. God's character is trustworthy enough to trust him even when the outcome doesn't end up in our favor. Even when we can't control the outcome. And the question is, do we understand who our Jesus is, what he's accomplished for us, and how it empowers us to make decisions where we are not fixated on the outcomes because God's character is enough. Would you stand together, please?
We want to invite you to sing this new song with us this morning. This song is called Know You Will. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel like listening to a sermon on a Sunday or a speaker or a message, I feel like I have a target on my back. And it's God speaking directly to me and saying, hey, this is it. This is what I want to tell you. I know myself, I'm a perfectionist. I like to see that perfect outcome, like we talked about. I like to see and have control of what the outcome's going to be so it's in my favor. And trusting God to do things that are uncertain is hard. It's very difficult. But we need to be reminded that he still makes a way. He still has the answer. He's in control. He's trustworthy. And that's what this song is about. It's what it's saying. We're going to sing the words, when the road runs dead, you can see a way, I don't. And it makes no sense, but you say that's what faith is for. When I see a flood, you see a promise. When I see a grave, you see a door. And when I'm at my end, you see where the future starts. I don't know how you make a way, but I know you will. Please sing with us.
When the road runs dead, you can see a way I don't. And it makes no sense, but you say that's what faith is for. When I see a flood, you see a promise. When I see a grave, you see a dawn. When I'm at my end, you see where the future starts. I don't know how you make a way, but
It's impossible to live this way. To live in the confidence that God is trustworthy enough to just obey him and leave the consequences to him. It's impossible to live that way if we are not being transformed internally. So as I think about where we are as a church and where we're going, and I think about where God is leading us, there is a depth, there is a need for us to grapple with things internally. God's going to change us in ways that we can't even comprehend, and the behavioral side of this is important. Like, we want to do things that honor God externally, but this is the kind of stuff that if you're not changed internally, it's never going to happen. You will buckle under the weight of the moment. So I invite you once again to grab some of the resources, to be part of that spiritual formation, to be in a position where when you're forced to ask that simple question, if God allows this, is it still the right decision? If God doesn't show up the way I want him to, if this doesn't work out in my favor, is it still right to obey him? That's something that has to be coming from the inner parts of our being, and that's the work that God wants to do in our lives. May you embrace that as we lean into it and trust his character by learning how to trust him.